Our speaker today is Mr. Dave Yoho. He has a long and successful career in the field of business. He has made over 5,000 paid speeches in every state in the United States and 22 foreign countries. He has written numerous books. 2 became bestsellers. He has been invited to the White House 3 times and has appeared in over 100 training movies for major U.S. corporations. Dave has appeared on most TV talk shows, including The Tonight and The Today shows. In this capacity, he has received the Oscar of Public Speaking, the Master of Influence Award, and the Hall of Fame designation from his peers. In the world of business and commerce, Dave has been referred to as the superstar of motivation and training. He is most proud of his career in the U.S. Maritime Service and the U.S. Merchant Navy in World War II. I believe you will enjoy both his message and the unusual manner in which he delivers it, plus the energy he brings to what he does. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Dave Yoho.
Thank you, thank you. At my age, having things go wrong that delay 10 or 15 minutes usually means I take a nap. I know I speak for many of you at my age. I don't even buy green bananas. First of all, I'd like to salute my comrades from World War II. So just, you don't stand, but please raise your hands if you're World War II. God bless you. We don't cede to the fact that there are other veterans. So veterans from other aspects of war, please raise your hands of our country. Thank you. And we also thank the chapters and their representation, our national officers, and the volunteers who in your organizations, having done as many speeches as I've done throughout the world, we rely heavily on the work of volunteers, and you've got some of the best. And I hope you take it not for granted at what they do. Wonderful. Starting at the list, Cindy, who is an absolute joy for me to work with. I said it at the last convention if you weren't there. When they made arrangements to have me speak, I called and spoke to her. I sent her bio stuff, and she said, she said, are you a veteran of World War II? I said, yes. She said, Yoho, is that really your name? I said, yes. She said, which side were you on? Now, she didn't really say that. I will tell you, 1 year since we met last in New Orleans, and you've been in my mind and on my heart and in my prayers ever since. I want to think about why we're here. And you know, it's God's mystery that we are still here. Well, I grew up as a child. Even the Bible said 80 years and 10. And a number of us are way beyond that calendar. And when I grew up at 65, you had to retire. And when I grew up and my grandparents were in their 60s, I look at them and said, boy, they are old people. And now we have seen the future, and it are us. So what binds us? What brings us together and what binds us? I sometimes think it's a memory. I don't know how you are at home. Maybe you're a crouchy old grouch at home, but I will tell you this. The minute we start to talk about where you went to base, what you did after, the ships you were on, some of the mess-ups, some of the indecencies, and some of the neglect that we suffered, your face lights up like a Roman candle, without incident. Except one guy I was talking to in the lobby last night, and I found out he was really here for the Rotary Convention, and he didn't know what I was talking about either. So what binds us together is our history, the commonality of what we did, how we did it, and what we chose to do to come to the aid of our country, our history. Now, what do we have in common? If you look around, everybody except Mendez has lost some of the hair that they had when they were young. And you look around at our leadership. Chris, I had to ask him if he's old enough to vote yet. But see, the homogeneity of what we bring together, the commonality has nothing to do with our roots, our name, our financial sector, none of those. We all came from an era. We came from an era, and we were asked to do a job, and I think we did it. And in the aura of political correctness, bringing God in is supposed to be taboo. None of those things are going to be taboo today. If you look at a dollar bill, It has on it a copy of the Great Seal of the United States. It has these Latin words, E pluribus unum. And you've seen it, you read it. How many of you know what it means? Out of one, many. Out of one, many. You're the voice. The voice. Don't you feel bad walking across the floor to the floor and embarrassing me? Yes.
No. I want to take your photo.
No, that was not an invitation for you to say more. It was just kind of passing comment.
Sorry.
So we're the voice of our history. We are the voice. And when we're gone, I don't know what they're going to do. But let me tell you about our responsibility, at least I see it. We speak for those who are not here. We speak for those who can't afford to be here, those who are in nursing homes, those who have suffered in their fragility, the awesome of warness and what it did to us personally, and for those who are in hospitals, and for the sad state of affairs that lists us as veterans and veterans all over the world. And we had 16 million in uniform and 400,000 or less of all veterans in the United States. And what a time to have a breakdown in the Veterans Administration. I want you to last through this next part of my presentation. But give me some joy and conference. Say it one more time.
Hell no, we won't go away.
Yeah, hell no, we won't go away. And I don't like profanity, and I don't consider that profanity. I think it's a statement of facts. Before I get into the body, I was thinking, what can I tell you about growing old that you don't know? You were probably taught that fast food was something that you ate for Lent. Building a relationship was what you did when your cousin visited. Your parents never put you in a daycare center because they didn't exist. And by the way, group therapy, nursing homes came much, much later, even though some of the people we knew when we were growing up belonged in them. Growing up and during your school days, you made it without a cell phone, a Twitter account, or social networking. My sister in her 80s, I call and say, how was Thanksgiving? Wonderful. Were the grandchildren there? She said, I'm not sure. They come in with those things with their head down and pressing that stuff with their thumbs. We made it without that. We made it without a Twitter account or social networking. Now, we adapted to many things. We adapted to FM radios, tape decks, CDs, electric typewriters, digital watches, Velcro, word processors, faded and torn jeans that I was ashamed to wear to school, and now they pay more money for it. We didn't have yogurt. And in truth, in all the ships I ever sailed on and all the military actions, I never saw a guy with an earring. Now, what did I learn? This is my 89th year, and I'm proud to be here and thankful to be here. I married well. This is my lovely wife. If you haven't met her, she's really the brains in the whole family. Here's what I learned. I learned, first of all, you know what we do with hecklers, don't you? Did you ever see the time when we... and you came from this business. So you got 2 points against you, and I got some Polaroids of you from 1946 that your family would like to see. Here's what I learned, that no matter how serious your life requires you to be, everybody needs to know someone who's goofy. I learned that life is like a roll of toilet paper. No matter what Gump said in there, it's like a box of chocolate. Life is like a roll of toilet paper. The end comes faster. The roll diminishes quicker. I also learned that under everyone's hard shell is someone who wants to be appreciated and loved. I learned that life is tough, and that the reason we're here is we're tougher, and we've made up our minds that we're not going to give in. I learned that when you harbor any bitterness, happiness will avoid you. And then I learned that everyone wants to live on the top of the mountain, but all the happiness and growth occurs while you're climbing. Now, somewhere these gentle people took my other mic. Oh. Oh, thank you. You're welcome. So here's what I'm going to do today. Some of you has asked about something I wrote, and some of you got a book. It's called the Epod Theory or the Epod Resolution. 30 years of study as to what brought success to most people. 30 years of study that I encompassed in 4 elements of behavior, and behavior that I was able to witness in some people firsthand and the others by research. And it's called the Epod Theory, spelled E-P-O-D. That's not a word. It's taking 4 letters and creating a word. It's called an acronym. Now, the E stands for energy, energy, energy. Now, in terms of energy, and I had some crib notes here, right? How much can you deliver at any given time? More than you think. The strangest thing, somebody was saying to me recently that here in the United States, we take age for granted. The last survivor of Pearl Harbor, 105, the military, 105 years old. The last survivor from the Arizona, 1,500 men on the Arizona, 1,500. Wow. There are 3 left. Because 1,200 went down with that baby. So what I learned is that we are fortunate to be here. How much energy do we want to display to anything at any given time? It's in your mind. It's what you think, what you can do. It's what you believe you can do. And every time you think it's all over and there's nothing good can happen again, it will happen if you decide it to happen. It wasn't a close buddy. We didn't correspond all the time, but Jack LaLanne was a friend of mine. I never saw Jack LaLanne eat white bread. I never saw him taste anything of sugar. I never saw him taste caffeine. And somebody said, "What's left?" Well, lots of stuff are left, and he made it a great thing. And I knew both he and his wife, and when he passed away, his wife carried on with that. Energy is something that you're given as a child. Watch a baby move around. They have no idea about the energy they're expended or the parent that has to follow that level of energy. Don't ever take it for granted. Now, what are we going to do with our faith in love? What are we going to do about this House bill? What are you going to do about where we are today and what can be brought about? Crib notes again. I have to tell you a story that gets you. When I work on the stage, I do all these stories. And I see, sir, you're from the clergy, and I'm sure this won't offend you. It is a Saturday night, and in a Catholic church, the priest is about to hold confession. And an old guy comes in on a cane, and he sits down. He says to the priest, "Father, got something on my mind I got to tell you about." He said, about 4 weeks ago, I was out on the town. I met a young woman, 28 years of age. He said, "I understand, nothing wrong with this. I met this young woman. It was entrancing. We had a couple of drinks together. I bought one of them things in the glass like this, the brandy. Whee, boy, did we have some time. And I'm absolutely, this woman has me just all wrapped up. I've been back 3 times since then, and I'm going to go every chance I get." And the priest said to him, "Sir, are you Catholic?" He said, "No." So he said, "Why are you telling me?" He said, "I'm telling everybody." Now explain that to the ones that aren't laughing. See, it's a joke. Getting back to energy, see, I am going to tell you about 3 people. I'm going to tell you about Lee Iacocca, who I had the good fortune to meet and work with. I want to tell you about this. When you think you're down and you can't get this H154 through, I want to tell you about Iacocca. Iacocca was the vice president of Ford, being made vice president. He had signed a contract. He became a president of Ford Motors, and there in that contract was a that you couldn't compete, non-compete clause. So that meant he couldn't get any job he wanted. So along came Chrysler and said, "We're in trouble. We have," now $1 billion was a lot more money then than it is today. They said, "We're in trouble. We have a $2 billion deficit in our pension fund. We have less than $1 billion in cash reserves. We want you to change what's happened." They used to be number 3. The number 3 in the United States. And here's what Iacocca said. I will take the job on an if-come basis. He gave $1 million to Ford to get out of his non-compete. He took the job for $1 and an if-come, meaning he got an incentive plan if he could bring that back. And what did he do? First of all, if you go back to that period of time, he was a very unusual guy. I am chairman of Chrysler Corporation of America. They're the initials that spell out his name, and he let everybody know it. And they said, what a fine man he was. They said, who impacted you most? He said, my grandfather. My grandfather used to touch me on the shoulder and say, Lee, don't work with your hands, you work with your head. Hands have no memory. Now imagine, he brought this about. And in 4 years, this company, again, became the #3 automobile company in the United States, and he got his first payday of $26 million because up to that point he worked for $1 per year. Iacocca, a grand scheme. I want to tell you also about Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, who I had. One of the wonderful things that happened in my life, I got to meet these people. They weren't close friends, but I did get to meet him. And I thought of Dr. Peale, and I heard him speaking at 90 years of age. He was up in front of it. He had been the pastor of a congregation in New York City for 50 years. And I heard him speak and be all perspired when he got down. I couldn't believe he could get up there and give a sermon for 20, 25 minutes and pump that much energy. I said, Dr. Peale, sometimes isn't it true that you get up there and you start to think, didn't I just say this? Or didn't I say that last week? He said, David, when that happens, I look out at the congregation and say, I know you've heard me say this before, but it's worth repeating. So here, we're fighting for something. Oh, I want to tell you also about Mother Teresa. I never met her, never had the great opportunity to meet her, although I have a friend who did. I want to tell you what happened to this little nun. Did you ever see a picture of her? I don't care if you're Catholic, Protestant, Christian, Jew, whatever it is. 5'1". Don't know how to take no. She doesn't know the word no. She said K-N-O-W, but N-O is not in her vocabulary. So when times get tough, she says to her diocese, I want to go to India. 7 times she asked to go. 7 times she's denied. We need you here. Does that stop her? She breaks some rules and goes to the Holy See, which is the governing body, supposedly the Islamic body of the Catholic Church in the Vatican. And she goes there and she says, I want to go to India. They say, no, your diocese said you can't go, you can't go. 4 times later, she went back. And finally, one of the cardinals said, let her go. Let her go. Let her go do it, but don't give her any money. Now you look, all you have to do is Google her and see what she did from someone saying no. No, you can't do that. The energy used to recruit us is something of its own. Do you remember the things that they told you about why you should be in the Merchant Marine? Now, I went in when I was 15. I was a junior in high school. And I have my picture. I'll show you a little later. It came up on the recruiting poster for the U.S. Maritime Service. I didn't look older than 15. I didn't shave. I came from the inner city where I had never been out of the inner city. You got to be quick to be able to do that. So what happened? They tell you about this glamorous life. Something nuts about this. 6 weeks they train you. They'll tell you the training you get. 6 weeks they train you, and they put you on the ship. Raise your hand if you had never been on a ship when they put you on a ship. Raise your hands. And we're going to go win the war. Wow. So here's your energy. You make a determination. That's where the E comes from. You make a determination where you want your energy to be on any given day. And the saddest time is the morning when you wake up. You're never going to be happy with yourself. You're going to look in the mirror. You're not going to like what you see. I have a picture of myself when I was recruited. I had this black hair, this pompadour. Something like this, only real. And so I had this wonderful feeling about who I was. And now I look in the mirror, and I think, whatever happened to that guy? And incidentally, I don't ever have mirrors in the back of me because I look good in front. If you look around the back, I look like I was training to be a monk. So now I would like to have that youthful face. I would like to go without the wrinkles. And incidentally, I cupped it all off. I became a boxer. I became a boxer I boxed before, but I boxed in truthful earnestly when I went to Sheepshead Bay. I was on the boxing team. I fought 53 times as an amateur in my 53 times. Now, my wife doesn't like me to do this. This is what I see in the morning. See, I have nothing in there. And by some miracle, it stays straight. At least you want to put it back. Is it straight now? All right. So here's what I'm saying. You're going to get the opportunity in your life to look at that in the mirror and say, this is going to be a great day. You get that opportunity. We're going to make that 154 work. Now, what about the next part, persuasion? I want you to remember something about persuasion. Anytime you get up and hear somebody speaking, the first thing they say is, I, we, me, I, we, me. You know you're in for a long morning, a long day of listening to somebody talk about themselves. This is not about me. This is about you and what we are and what we can be and where we can take this. Here's what I wrote down. How do we reach the misinformed? How do we? I hold no malice towards them. I mean, somebody in Sheila Silver is telling me the other day about the things that she experienced when you go in front of a group of people. You cannot know what you don't know. And let me tell you, darlings, I've been paid a lot of money in my life to go in where people are getting paid a lot of money and they can't make decisions on their own, so they call me in, right? And there's an interesting thing will happen about when you see that I sought out a speaking career. Everything work out all right? Okay. I sought a speaking career. I'm going to tell you at the end how it all came about, and it's actually the opposite of what you may think. So here, persuasion is not what you say to people, but the outcome of what you say. Look, how many of you ever heard that the Merchant Marine is a soulless place for draft dodgers? That's what happened in World War II. How many of you ever heard that? Yeah. Do you know what the draft age was in the 40s? 18. First draft, 18. How many of you went in before you were 18? How many of you knew people in the Merchant Marines that were over 35? Never subject to the draft. How many of you have ever heard of the Seabees? Yeah. All the misfits that couldn't pass the physical. We put 16 million people, and we were 250,000 of those people, and we were misfits. I didn't have the good sense. They put me on a ship. I came from the inner city. The closest I ever got to a ship was on Schuylkill River, which is not too far from our house, and they had boats there with oars. They didn't have a whipper, but everything, you get out there and you row your boat. So now you say, well, how do you persuade somebody that what they've done? I want to tell you about a friend of mine. How many of you have ever heard of a book called Chicken Soup for the Soul? Yeah. That's a close friend of mine. I asked him, Dr. Hanson, Mark Victor Hanson, how many rejections did you get when you sent in your first manuscript? Bill Giroux, you're going to feel very good about this one. 184 rejections. His books have sold collectively over 100 million in 27 languages. I want you to experience something else with me. How many of you have seen Saving Private Ryan? How many of you haven't? It's just a trick question. You either saw it or you didn't see it. Let's do it one more time. How many of you have not seen Saving Private Ryan? Go. Takes a little courage for the first 15 or 20 minutes. Because in the first 15 and 20 minutes, then you know the first wave never made it ashore. But there's an interesting thing that happens in that movie, because the whole movie is about saving this guy whose brothers had been annihilated, and they had to go into invasion of Normandy, And they had to go and find him and bring him home. And he survived, and the people who went to find him were knocked off. So the movie starts with him kneeling, looking for a cross. What does he ask? Here's what he asked. Did I lead a worthy life? Did I lead a worthy life? Now you sit here in a different phase of your life. We've been talking about what we didn't get. We got some wonderful experience. I came home at 17. I wasn't old enough to vote or to buy a drink legally. So naturally, since we had a liquor here, I never went in any place that sold alcohol. Look, what happens in preparation for persuasion? World War II. I am going to be speaking at the World War II Memorial on the 29th of May, which is Memorial Day. And there are less than 400,000 veterans, and I'm going to be there. Now, it's a wreath-laying ceremony, and I don't know who all will be there to lay the wreaths, and I've met generals and people from all over. And then they push out on wheelchairs and walkers as many World War II veterans. But they've asked me to speak. I said, you got to go see me on television. You got to go see the way I speak, because you may not like what I'm going to tell you. We face people who do not know and do not care that they don't know. But that doesn't mean we give up on them. Persuasion is what can come out of that. Now, I want you to think about something else, about the great speeches you've ever heard. How many have ever read in total Lincoln's Gettysburg Address? How many have never read Lincoln's Gettysburg Address? See, we had the same thing before. See, you either did or you didn't. It's like pregnancy, you either are or you ain't, right? So how many of you have never read Lincoln's Gettysburg Address? You have to read it. It's an absolute treatise on one of the finest speeches ever made in the history of the world. It took less than 3 minutes. 272 words, utterly void of first person. He didn't tell you about himself or what he was saying. He didn't tell you about what he did in his career as presidency. He spoke about the burial. 620,000 died in the Civil War. Brother fought brother. And he has to give an address at a cemetery. But it wasn't a speech, because the speech was made by a man by the name of Dr. Edward Everett, who then was the finest orator in the world, or so they told me. He was also the president of Harvard. Now here's this man Lincoln, homespun. He delivered this speech without first person. He didn't start with I, we, me. He used collective nouns such as, we are now engaged in a great Civil War testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long indeed. And he used the word our, but they're collective nouns. And when he got done, this is history for you. The Boston Globe, the reporter said, our president died more loathed than loved. And yet we're going to convince somebody to listen to us only when we understand that if ever we seek to do in our lives at any given time what we seek to do, we may never get to enjoy. And Jefferson said, we plant trees under which we may never sit. And such it is what we're doing. But I'm telling you about persuasion only because I want you to really believe. One of the things I'm going to talk about is about us in a different way. I'm going to ask you to think about this. Anyone in the room, no matter your age. I want you to think of your grandson, your son, leaving home. He'll have a small suitcase because you can't take too much personal things with it. And that boy is going to get on a trolley car or a bus or a train. And as you look at him, Are you willing to say in your heart, I may never see that child again? Oh, he may come home again, but he's never going to be the same. In all the studies about the changeover on young people when they go in the military, and it takes us so long as a country to recognize the truth. Post-traumatic stress didn't start last week, last month, last year. It's existed all through World War II. And when World War II ended, we had over 1 million beds with people with post-traumatic stress. We had the highest incidence of alcoholism that ever existed in this country and the highest level of suicides because no way to go back. And your persuasion is to get someone to listen, to hear that. Oh, a friend of mine, football, was a NFL referee. He tells this story. He's at the Bears game, he's officiating, and the Bears officially won the game. And they won the game on the last play. He threw a flag because it was holding. So that came back and the Bears lost. Next day, he and a fellow referee are going out to a farm where the farmer who had agreed to let them hunt on his land. And he says to the guy, now I better go talk to him. First place, he's a Bears fan. He may be very upset. So he went in and talked to the man. The man said, nah, that's perfectly all right. He said, but listen, if you want to do me a favor, you got your guns there. I got a mule out there, and that mule has a cancerous spine. I got to put him down, and I don't have the courage to do it. Would you shoot him for me? The referee said, yes, I will. But instead he went back and he put on the other guy. He told him a joke. He said, hey, was he upset? He told us to get off the land as soon as possible. I'll show you getting off his land. He picks up his shotgun, goes over and shoots the mule. Boom! He turns around feeling that he's got the guy, and all of a sudden he hears 2 shots. Bang! Bang! The other guy said, and I got 2 of his cows, too. Optimism. How do you get it in a positive world? How do you get it? You make it. The worst thing you can do this morning is get up and put on the news. You're not going to hear the news anymore. What you're going to hear is somebody's opinion. I don't care which side of the ballot you vote on. You're going to hear somebody's opinion of what happened. And the opinions about us are going to stay until we convince other people by our behavior and by our force of will that they cannot win. There is no way for them to win. Do you know that prior to the Revolutionary War, and some of you are strong military, I see a gentleman here with a lot of gold braids, so you may know a lot more about this than I do. There were rules of war. Rule number 1, you did not fight on any holiday, including Sunday. Rule number 2, you fought in the open. One army here, one army there, usually in separate colors, and you marched towards each other. Number 3, hear this, you didn't fight in the rain. Do you know how we run the Revolutionary War? On Sundays, behind trees, and in the rain. Well, that's exactly right. What I'm saying to you is the laws of conventionality within the modality of ethics, the roles of conventionality do not exist. Not if you're going to make it. Bill Giroux, where's Bill? Bill wrote an amazing book. I've talked to him a number of times on the phone. And he brought to life something I hadn't even thought about myself, that we lost 3,000 men in the first 7 months of the war on the Peale of the trail of Halifax, Nova Scotia, down to Tampa, Florida. That area where the Germans were smart enough to have the wolf pack, they declared war on us. We didn't declare war on them. 4 days after Japan hit us, they declared war on us because of a Sino pact they had. So then what happened? Our ships negotiated those waters. Do you know the story? No armament, no armed guard, no convoy, because the admiral who ran us said we didn't need it. And ships, victory ships, liberty ships, taking telephone poles and making them look like cannons. We've got to get the message. You say, we've done it. No, you haven't, or otherwise we'd have cured this process. And then you have to realize this. Those convinced beyond their will remain of the same in position still. So we have an obligation not only to ourselves, but those who predeceased us. You all have the stories. You all have friends. I read your magazine, and I want to thank you. I finally read your magazine last night. I thank you for the page, giving me tribute. But I am simply a spokesman. A spokesman is good too. A spokesman for those who aren't here. And we are all spokespeople for the people who are not here. So now we got through energy persuasion. Let me get to optimism. Very difficult thing to hear, the negativity which pursues our world today. You tell me that there can be a reason that somebody burns our flag? We stood at attention when the flag was raised and when it came down every day in our base camp where we went for boot camp. On a ship, you walked on the ship, and the first thing you knew is you stood, faced forward, and saluted the ensign, the flag. And you're telling me that somebody can burn that flag. Why? Freedom of speech? No. That's not freedom of speech. That's freedom to destroy and violate my culture. I want you to take a close look at me. I have the same color white hair you are. I can never stand in a room or be present where someone does that. Never. And if someone chooses not to stand through the Star-Spangled Banner, they may say that's their right, and I have the same right. Right now, you're seeing what happened to the quarterback who did it. The American public says, we don't want to see this guy play. So they'll give you all the reasons why he's not there. But the truth is, our sensitivities, our optimism was based on what we were told. Tell the guys that scaled Pont de Hoc. Pont de Hoc was in Omaha Beach. And they sent the Rangers up this, it's a wall, looks like this, and they sent them right up that wall. There were 178 of them when the day began. 35 made it for the next 2 days. So they were interviewed on D-Day, or D-Day celebration. And they're interviewing the survivors. Why'd you do that? Well, we were told to do it. Who told you? Lieutenant told us, and when the sergeant blew the whistle, that's what we did. Were we optimistic? Yes, we were. And we thought we were doing what was right. I have some pictures of what I looked like when I was 15, and I certainly didn't look like a 17-year-old guy. I had fuzz. So what right do we have to be optimistic? Going back to my notes here. We functioned, did what we were told to do. The outgrowth. No GI Bill. No medical insurance. Worst of all, we came home to a recession. Of the 16 million people in uniform, one of the things that did occur is that we had these jobs that had to fit everybody coming back, and there were 10 million people flooding that market right away. Malaria. How many of you had or know someone that had malaria? It never ends. I can't even give blood. Ulcers. I was diagnosed with ulcers. 17 years old. Ulcers. You're telling me I have ulcers. And I was treated till I was 60 until they found out it was something called H. pylori. But during that period of time, I paid out of my own pocket. I paid for my schooling. This is not about me. It's about us. It's about what we did. And never lose sight of that. You had no idea when you came home. You, any one of you, had no idea when you came home what you wanted to do. You were telling me, Nelson, that you've been married for 70 years, and your wife corrected you, said almost 70 years. It happens every day in my life, so I know that. And the answer is, you're right, hon. But how do you get to be where we are today? You got to think about this. You want optimism? We are here, and we are making it. And God bless us, we're going to continue to do it until somebody comes along and says you can't. How about heave ho, my boys? And are you going to sing that? Are you singing that sometime this week? I got to hear it. Because every time I've been to a military function, and I've been invited to a lot of them, they play all the services. And I say, what about that one? What are the words, they asked me. I don't even remember the words. I do remember this. When they played it on the field, you were supposed to stand. And we were supposed to say, that's us, and we're proud to be here. 1988. I can't even believe this. I can't explain it. I have volunteered to speak at the schools or universities on a pro bono basis. I wouldn't charge them, so that the children of this world get an understanding of what life was about for us. In 1988, I want you to figure out how old you were. We got a piece of the GI Bill. Now think what the average person in this room was between 63 and 70 years of age, and somebody is going to say, now you can buy a house on the GI Bill and you can get a reduced mortgage. Now you can go back to school and get, because the law is there and it's in print, and somebody said through the whole process, we're doing something for these guys. All we really need is to understand what we did and how we did it. And yeah, it wasn't all great. But I do commit again to Bill Giroux's book, because I believe it points out things and issues of life, and so that's the O. And this is, can you see me later? Oh, no. I thank you for that. That's the words to heave-ho, and I'll treasure them, and I will. Sometime today I'm going to look at that and really get it back. Now, you know what you did? You broke my chain of thought. So now I break in with some Welsh mining songs or other things. I do bird imitations. Here's what I want you to remember. Optimism is a central condition only of people who believe. Hear me one more time. And Father, I don't know what your faith is, but I do know this. Everything that I learned becoming a Christian after I was in my 40s, I became a Christian. Everything I learned in there has been committed somewhere in Scripture. The mind does not know the difference between the real or the imagined. The mind does not know the difference between the real and it's up to you. In any given time in your life, you're going to have an opportunity to look at this and say, but we're here. Now, the two oldest guys in the room, as I understand it, are number one here. No, you're not. You're the oldest. And I said, he's almost your age. You say he's a kid. Yeah, what is he, 3 months younger than you? Right. But I think it's great. These guys are 96 years of age and really great. And they're great people to know it, and they got a spontaneity. And stop holding the hands here. This is not a time. We got children around here. This is not a time for a public display of affection. I'm having the security check your room. But see, here, the optimism of knowing and just believing that whatever you're going to do. Do you know that 1 year ago, your guardian angel, the congresswoman who was supporting you, Han, she's going to leave office. What do you have to replace it? And at times, to many of you, you might have thought, well, it's over, it's done. We tried. It's over, it's done. Where did Congressman Green come from? Can anyone tell me? No, I know he comes from, that's geographic. Where did he come from? Why did he seek us? Why did we seek him? How did we know?
He was one of our co-sponsors.
He was a co-sponsor. He believes. We have to believe if he believes. And we have to stimulate enough congressmen to understand our case. So when I get done my presentation at the World War II Memorial, I'm holding a prayer vigil at Mermans. There's a place in the memorial that's called Mermans that gives title. And I'm going to bet you 95% of the people that I invite to that prayer vigil don't even know the story of PQ-17, one of the great tragedies of our war, where 35 ships are being sent to a section of Russia where the water, the sea, is so cold that you cannot make it. You cannot exist for more than 5 to 7 minutes. Patterns of war. If your ship is disabled, no other ship can stop. No other ship can stop even to take you from a lifeboat. They cannot do that. So there was a British general with no malice intended, and that British general decided to withdraw the support they had 7 destroyers. They had 13 support ships, which had been destroyer escorts, very fast. And they withdrew them because where they were near the port of Norway, where this big German battleship, the Tirpitz, was. And they thought that Tirpitz was going to attack that convoy, and they pulled them away. 35 ships. If you don't know this history, 11 got through. And we don't even know about it in our history. In Bari, Italy, on a surprise raid, they take out a whole group of ships, and one of the ships has in the cargo poison gas, mustard gas, outlawed by war. But it was there at the request of a British general, and it was in those ships, and no one knew it. By knowledge other, someone dropped a bomb and blew up that ship. And how many people do you think you know about Bari? Or Pontohac? Or the raid on the fields of Polesti? Well, I'm about to wrap up. I want to give you a couple other things to think about. This thing about being optimistic. If you think about it, your friends are going to think you're crazy. So I was speaking in Houston, Texas, and a man came up at the end, and he had real Texas there. He had on a Stetson and a string tie, and had on a Texas cut suit. And he said, "Mr. Yoho, you're talking about optimism today. I'd like to tell you about my cousin, Cecil Ray." He said, "He's the most optimistic man I ever met. He was running for a political office, and he picked up the voter registration list from the county seat, and he had it over his sun visor. Went out house to house searching for people to ask them to vote. He come up to this house, he took down the list, he found the name, he walked up and knocked on the door. Woman come to the door, he said, 'Good morning, ma'am.' He swept off that Stetson like a gentleman. 'My name is Cecil Ray Rhodes, and I'm running for assistant deputy dog catcher in this here county, and I sure would like your vote.' Said that woman turned around, looked at my cousin and said, 'Cecil Ray, I know you and all your whole blamed family, and none of you's any good. You're always out drinking and playing with cards and taking off, and I never knew anybody in your family could hold a job. Now I'm going to tell you something. I wouldn't vote for you if you was the onlyest man left on this here earth. And the second thing I'm going to tell you, my husband's got a 16 gauge in there full of shotgun. I'm going to put a load of that in the bad place of your anatomy if you do not get off my porch right now. And if you is hurt, I will not shoo the buzzard from your body.' He said, my cousin Cecil went back in the car, removed the voter registration poll, searched out the woman's name, took a pencil from behind his ear and wet it on his tongue and wrote, 'Doubtful.' So now we're going to get to discipline. This is the most difficult thing I know of. Why did we do what we were told to do? I'm going to tell you discipline. We did what we were told to do. Discipline. Why? Why did we do this? And for some of you, it was a great place to get away from your youth, or a great place to get around for people that you thought you didn't. Or maybe it was just a spiritual belief that what we were doing was important. And I sat on a ship that had been in the Pacific for 13 months, and they broke radio silence. We were at the invasion of Okinawa. They broke radio silence on August 15th to tell us that the war was over. We didn't believe it, because they told us this wild thing about the bomb that was dropped that wasted a whole city. But when they told us that was August 15th. I was 4 days from my 17th birthday. From my 17th birthday. And so we asked people to recognize we did what we were asked to do. Not everybody gets the opportunity to do something outrageous or unbelievable. Go watch Hacksaw Ridge. How many of you have seen that so far? If you haven't seen it, go see it. A tribute to a real hero who refused to handle a gun. Watch it. But again, you got to be able to watch the first 15 minutes. And when you watch the first 15 minutes, you'll understand there is no solution for what we're talking about, or for everyone to understand. and he was rebuffed, and he was called to, how about Doolittle's raid? That was in June, 7 months after we were hit, Doolittle's raid. Now, my wife and I were at the honors, American, honors, the Veterans Conference of all the people that have the Medal of Honor. And out of the people on that flight, only 2 guys were left at the time, and one is over 100 years of age. And he came over, we were sitting with a general, and he came over and he spoke to us. And it was such a marvelous, moving experience that he could be there and be able to talk to us lucidly. And he was 100 years old. These are the things which God hath given us. I'm not going to go hazy on you here. I'm going to tell you that I believe everything that happens in our life has a purpose, and our purpose was collectively to be a part of a movement that wasn't understood. Too bad! You're messing with the wrong dude. We ain't going to go anywhere because, hell no, we won't go away. I want to tell you one other thing. From every strength, there is a weakness. For every weakness in our lives, God gives us a strength that we may not endure. Now, it's probably known to you. If you lose your hearing, your eyesight may improve. People who lose both their hearing, like Helen Keller, their sense of touch improves. So there is something called the law of compensatory devices. Now, that's the law of compensatory devices. That's something we talk about in psychology. But you were put on this earth for a purpose. Energy, persuasion, optimism, and discipline. You spell them forward, it says EPOD equals, say the word.
Epod.
Spell it backwards.
Dope.
I didn't create it that way. Here's what I'm going to say. You have a choice of how you want to see it. I will tell you something in this, and then I want to read something that everyone here will get a copy of. And I want you to listen to it seriously. But before I do it, I have to tell you a funny story. The way I got involved in public speaking, as a child, inner city schools, I had a problem. I have a congenital malformation. You wouldn't be able to discuss it, to discern it, unless you were very privileged to know how these things work. But I have 3 things that's wrong that make it difficult for me to say certain words. So in this Philadelphia school system, in about 2nd or 3rd grade, they put me in speech therapy, which I hated every day. I had enough problems trying to like my teachers without now having to do and say exercises to teach me to speak correctly. But here's the irony. The money that people have paid me in my life, not even knowing this. I always tell them at the end, though, I say, this is not a farce. Yeah, and it's public record. So I'm going to tell you the story about that. Now remember, this is a joke. That part of the story is true. I go back to the time. How many of you go back to the time when you had to place a telephone call, long distance, you had to talk to an operator? Do you remember that? Tough rules, tough rules. So I gets on the phone. Guy gets on the phone, and he calls operator in New York. And he said, I'd like to have Muriel 76543. The operator said, would you mind repeating the number? I said, certainly. Muriel 76503. She said, do you have something in your mouth? I said, no, I ain't got nothing. Don't say ain't got nothing. That's a double negative. Don't use language. I said, oh, sorry. Say it one more time clearly. Muriel 76503. She said, I still can't understand you and don't know how anyone can. I said, maybe you understand this one, darling. And I jammed down the phone. There's a ring and a knock on the door in 10 minutes. There's a policeman standing about 6'5", equally tall telephone repairman. Cop said, you the guy that yelled at the girl, and in fact, she said, you said, take the phone and shove it. I said, he got me all excited. He said, I don't care how excited he got you. They're taking your phone out. I said, well, whoa, let me make one call. All right, I guess you can make one call. I went over and I called the operator. She answered the phone. I said, excuse me, are you the lady that I told to take the phone and shove it? She said, yes, I am. I said, well, get ready. They're bringing it over. I'm going to come back up here and read something to you. Some of you may have seen it or heard about it already. I have taken the liberty of writing something in your name that now is the hands on the desk of every congressman in the United States. It is, in addition to which, it is on the policy and decision makers in the United States. And then it's up to you to do with it what you want. But I would believe if you put this online, I have stuff that goes on YouTube. I don't even know how it works. I have stuff on Facebook, and it'll get me, I don't know, 12,000 people watching it or whatever it is. It's amazing. Well, within your families, you have the same opportunity. And this wasn't written as a treatise. This was written as a gift to you and understanding what you can do with it. It's called You Don't Know Me. Hear our plea and our story for the support of the legislation honoring World War II Merchant Mariners Act of 2017. We know that you are besieged with many requests for support of other courses. We know that you have many issues which may seem a priority to you and others. We ask you to give us, who remain, what was promised to us. If there are public hearings, we can provide brief testimony for our cause. We will provide information which will shed new light on our history and contribution during World War II. Moreover, we ask that you favor this aging group of veterans and let them know that they are not forgotten. And I call it our story. I want you to forgive me because some aspects of this, when I'm talking about you, I'm included in the group. We are but grains of sand on the vast seashore of life. We are part of a rapidly eroding station of life. We are old, and we are veterans of World War II. There were 16 million U.S. servicemen in uniform from a population of about 130 million. Our special group represented 250,000 of those veterans. Now, less than 2,500 of us remain. We were called to service by a great president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and legislation was enacted for the creation of our special group. We were issued and required to wear uniforms. Training marched in a military manner. We had to go through guards to get into our base, and we could not leave that base without special documentation. We were taught wartime techniques. We were taught the use of anti-aircraft guns, survival techniques, and each day our regimentation was supervised in a military manner with penalties for the violation of good conduct rules or military dress. We were all volunteers. We were present on all 5 continents on which that war was fought. We were together in Allied fighting forces and wherever they were called upon, at every invasion, on every sea, on every ocean. The Coast Guard administered our records and training, and the U.S. Navy controlled our scheduling, departures and destination for every ship that sailed. And here I refer to what Bill Giroux says in his book. In the first 7 months of that war, from December through July, what followed, many of us served on ships, and our comrades served on ships which sailed through hostile waters off our very eastern seaboard. From Nova Scotia down to Florida and further, these ships traveled without special armament, no guns or ammunition, and without convoy, following the routes and going to the ports mandated by the U.S. Navy. In those first 7 months of World War II, 300 ships were sunk in that avenue. 3,000 seamen were killed. Many more are injured. They weren't all U.S. seamen, but 60% of them were. In a distant place called Murmansk, Russia, Americans and Allied ships were called upon to deliver the goods of war. These ships, laden with tanks and trucks and planes and ammunition, fuel, clothing, and food, sailed through ice and sea so cold that those who were forced to abandon ship could survive for less than 10 minutes before going to a watery grave. No ships were permitted to stop or even slow down to rescue survivors. On one occasion, and this is PQ-17, all supporting combat ships were withdrawn, and the merchant ships and their crews were left to face the German onslaught, and we were murdered. We were sacrificed in a war that we didn't understand and others understand less today. The beautiful World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. pays tribute and homage to Murmansk, a place in Russia, as a critical battlefield of that war. Yet this is just one of the bloody, life-destroying encounters in which we participated and for which we paid dearly with our lives. The majority of us were very young when we enlisted, many under the age of 18. Some were 16 or 17 years of age. We were trained in a military environment and put on ships at graduation. When the war ended, we had the highest casualty rate of any of the services. And even then, our president then, Harry Truman, implored us to remain in service, to bring home those troops, return them to this continent, and then take supplies, machinery, and other equipments of peace to a needy world. As wars ended, we were eager to return to our homes and our families, yet most of us responded to the call and went on to continually serve our country. On June 22nd, 1944, President Roosevelt signed into law the GI Bill, which was presented to him by both houses of Congress. On that date, and for the record, President Roosevelt stated as follows: "I trust Congress will soon provide similar opportunities to the members of the Merchant Marines who have risked their lives time and time again during the war for the welfare of their country." Unfortunately, President Roosevelt died April 1945, a month or so before the war ended, and his desires and intent were not fulfilled. It took 43 years, gentlemen, it took 43 years until 1988 of struggle for many of us through our own medical bills, getting further education, or buying a home. These rights were finally given to us in 1988 when we were in our mid-60s, some over 70. We served as we were called upon to do. We were volunteers who pledged our lives in service for this great country. We gave up our youth. We gave up our youth and our maturing years, never to return. And all the research that I've done in this area said it became a wall from us ever to go back to the natural or normality of life that we were guaranteed when we were born. Not without pain, not without discomfort, but the rights. 3.5% of us died in that service. Many thousands more carried their injuries, both physical and psychologically, through their post-war lives. Ever proud of our country? We stand as able when our national anthem is played and when our flag is presented. At functions where the military services are honored, we applaud at each service and hear the music played. Ours, heave-ho, is seldom, if ever, rendered. We support our country, yet in our pain and our remembrance, we hear that our earnings far exceeded those in other services. This is not true. A boatswain mate in the Navy made approximately $2,250 per year. but he also received tax exemption of $1,500. A merchant marine equivalent, an able seaman, was paid approximately $2,600 a year, but all subject to taxes. If that seaman's ship was sunk or became a prisoner of war, his pay stopped. That was not so for the Army, Navy, or any other of the military. They received full pay, medical attention for dependents and medical dependents post-war. But a merchant seaman, under an act not related to merchant seamen, but related to any civilian, received $1 a day. And we have the case studies to show you someone who was in a prison camp for almost 3 years. And imagine coming out with $1,100 for your 3 years. We suffered post-war injuries in both mind and body, including but not limited to malaria, ulcers, H. pylori, and post-traumatic stress. For 43 years, we were denied those health care benefits which were made available to other veterans. We waited patiently as others affected by World War II were acknowledged and were given both kudos and compensation. We mourn. Our heart reaches out and screams. We mourn our brother mariners who have passed and their families who in turn cry out for recognition and ask you, congressmen, congresspeople, to support H.R. 154. Do you, can you, will you ever comprehend that we gave up our youth? For many of us, there was no high school graduation, dances, proms, sporting events, meetings at the ball shop, none of these things. Yes, these are things that we conscientiously or unconsciously agreed to abandon when we took an oath and did what we were asked to do. So we come to the end. And we talk about the misinformation that has guided many of the decisions of those who make our laws. Our war ended 72 years ago, brothers. Our life began anew. We licked our wounds. We bound our emotional hurts and moved our lives forward. Today, in our twilight years, we experience the continuing loss of our comrades, the dimming of our personal senses, and the discomfort that comes with disappointments. We read and hear the rumors and the misinformation. Only we, or those who faced World War II, in the circumstances in which we face it, can reflect on these implications. So we look to you, and we pray in God's name that you will support our plea, giving us hearing and an opportunity to dispel misinformation. Let your actions speak to our plea. Let us be remembered for what we did and how we fulfilled our oath. It is false that merchant marines were a harbor for draft dodgers. The original wartime draft was 18 years or older. Some volunteers might have opted out of the U.S. Army. So did many people who joined the Coast Guard or the Seabees or the Navy or the Marines. Some were unable to meet the physical requirements of the other services. Some, over the age of 35, were draft exempt and still volunteered to do their part. And hear me, African American members of the U.S. Merchant Marine may have opted out because we were the only totally integrated service known at that time. Someone said the Merchant Marine received inordinate benefits when in a combat zone, yeah? There were bonuses. Good-sized bonus if your ship was bombed or sunk, and limited bonus if your ship was in a combat zone. In my earlier example, the coastline of the eastern United States and the vastness of the Pacific Ocean were not considered combat zones. And the Merchant Marines were well rewarded for the risk they took. So the fact is that if a ship was sunk, Congressman and Congresswoman, or if a mariner was taken as a prisoner of war, and approximately 800 of our brothers were, their pay stopped. No benefits were extended prior or during captivity. Once in the Merchant Marine, you could no longer be drafted. Not true. If after a hard, difficult, hazardous voyage or whatever was completed, if you waited for another ship for more than 30 days, you were subject to the draft. Fable. All injured merchant mariners had the right to sue and require the owners of the ship to compensate for medical bills and loss of income. Fact. In many cases, these ships were owned by the U.S. government. One example would be what we call WET, that's War Emergency Tankers, on which I also served, built by the government, sometimes leased, but always regulated in terms of usage by the U.S. Navy. The concept of suing for justifiable injury, lingering disease, or the loss of compensation is complicated and largely unmanageable. And finally, the fable. Granting Merchant Marine access to the GI Bill in 1988 compensated them for any inequities they might have experienced. Now we know why that isn't true, and we know that it didn't compensate. And if at any time someone had taken this bill and revised it and said, let us hear from you, we have the ability, while some of us are alive, to appear before Congress and give you empirical data, truthful data on what has happened. So we implore you, we ask that you understand us and hear our cry for recognition, for honesty, for the integrity that is the United States government is known for. Hear our plea, and while we are still alive, grant us audience, grant us participation, and grant us that to which we are entitled. God bless you. Thank you.